Hi, everyone. Good evening. I am McKenna. I'm the owner of Murder by the Book in Houston, Texas, and I am very, very, very excited tonight to have Jake Tapper and Gillian Flynn joining us for an event for The Devil May Dance. I will mention a few things about the store, some things that are going on, since I think we're going to get some new audience members tonight, and then I'll bring both of them on with introductions. I'd like to mention that, again, we're Murder by the Book. We're in Houston, Texas, but we do mail order all over the world, really. We're a specialty crime fiction bookstore, and you can find out more about us at murderbooks.com. We started a subscription box plan this year, starting in January. Murder by the Box is what it's called, and you can also find information about that. We've got 3 different types of plans, and people seem to really be enjoying that. We've also, since COVID, we have done something like 250 virtual events with nearly 400 authors. So you can check out our YouTube channel, Murder by the Book, and almost all of those events are archived on there. So there's some pretty cool things that can be discovered. As I mentioned, we have signed copies available of The Devil May Dance. I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the comments right now for more information or to order from us. So that is available to you. If you have any questions, Gillian is going to interview Jake for a little while, and then we'll get to those questions in a bit. So you can pop those in the live chat on YouTube or in the comments section on Facebook. Okay, that's all of my announcements. We've got a good crowd watching and more joining. Let me get the show started. Good evening, Jake Tapper. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I hope next time it can be in person. I love
We would love that. Yeah. We would love that. I think a lot of people watching already know who you are, but I'm going to go ahead and do your formal introduction really quickly.
Okay.
Jake Tapper is the author of the Hellfire Club, which is being turned into a TV series by HBO Max, and the Outpost, which became a celebrated film released in 2020, an award-winning anchor for CNN. He joined the network in January 2013, and he lives in Washington, D.C. with his wife, daughter, and son. Like I said, he's here tonight for The Devil May Dance. We are also joined by Gillian Flynn.
Thanks.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Indeed. Gillian Flynn is the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller Gone Girl, for which she wrote the Golden Globe nominated screenplay, and the New York Times bestsellers Dark Places and Sharp Objects. A former critic for Entertainment Weekly, she lives in Chicago with her husband and children. And I am so excited to see you tonight, Gillian. It's been way too long. As you know, I've been a fan since the very beginning, and I'm really excited for this event tonight. So,
well, I mean, thank you for hosting us. I got to say, Murder by the Book is one of my all-time favorite bookstores. And you guys hosted me back when everyone else was like, big no thanks on you in the early days. So I will always remember that, and just wandering around your bookstore and how fantastic it is. So always thinking of you guys during this time, and how supportive you've been of the book community. So just really appreciate that.
Well, thanks so much for saying that. We have been doing our best, and we're on here every night with a virtual event. But like I said, tonight's a little bit special. I'm really excited about it. I am going to go away and leave you two to chat. Have fun. I'll be back on in a little bit with questions.
Cool.
Hi, Gillian.
Hi. Hey, how are you?
So can I say something just for the people watching? I just want to say this is very exciting for me, because before you agreed to read my book and blurb my book and then do this tonight, I've been a huge fan of yours for long. This is not just like log rolling. Like I'm just I love Gone Girl. I love Dark Places. Sharp Objects was incredible, and I loved Widows, which I loved. Watching, not even knowing that you had anything to do with it, just watching it, enjoying it. Like, this is a fantastic film. And then seeing your name, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, now it all makes sense because it's so good. So this is real. I haven't seen Utopia yet. I will.
Yeah. I'll be watching, making sure you will now. Thank you about Widows. It's one of those that people keep discovering it, which really makes me happy, because I did that with Steve McQueen, and it was just such a cool experience. We did it right here in Chicago, where I live, and it's nice to see that people people keep finding it.
Is it on Netflix or iTunes? I forget. I have every streaming service known to man, so I don't even know where I saw it.
Click a button and cross my fingers and see what. Yeah,
if you're looking for a great thriller / drama heist movie starring some of the coolest actresses in the world, this is it. Watch it. Go watch it.
Right on. Well, thank you for the plug. I'm going to go now. Bye. So I thought maybe we could start with, I always hate when other people try to explain someone else's book to them, but maybe you could, this is the second in a series with these great husband and wife team that so give me this Nick and Nora Charles kind of vibe. Really just the definition of like, this is going to sound strange, but like competent and incredibly entertaining. I mean, in addition to being like a great mystery and smart and everything, there are those very few authors where you can open a book by them and sort of know that you're going to be in good hands. You know what I mean?
Nice
like that feeling of like, no matter what happens, I am going to completely enjoy myself. So competent sounds like a weird verb, but like, I don't give that verb. What is competent?
It's an adjective.
An adjective. Thank you. You're so smart.
The pandemic has had an effect on all of us. Yeah.
Help me. But it's one of those like those very rare where it's like, I need a good book. Who would I look for? And so you're like, I just love this series. The second of the series, period story, and maybe you could just give the basics.
Sure. So the two basic things about the book to know are the main characters are really a couple. Charlie Martyr, who is an academic and a Republican congressman from New York, Republican in the Eisenhower Republican mold, not the Matt Gaetz mold. And then and his wife, Margaret, who's a zoologist and a very strong person, I think without question, the stronger person in the marriage in terms of her character. And I wanted to have, because I read a lot of thrillers, and most of the ones I read, they're great, but the lead character is a man, and he's usually a single man. So there's, and I wanted to have, I'm in a happy marriage, and I wanted to have a couple. I wanted, and it's not like their lives are without struggle or compromise, but I wanted to have a couple. So that's one. The main characters are Charlie and Margaret, and two, the inspiration for this book came from when I heard a real story, which is that after campaigning their hearts out for JFK in 1960, the Rat Pack, Frank Sinatra, the leader of the Rat Pack, expected that President Kennedy would stay with him when he came out to California in 1962. And he had all this work done on his Rancho Mirage estate, about 2 hours outside Los Angeles. He had a helipad built, extra rooms, phone lines, all this stuff for a presidential visit. And then Attorney General Kennedy heard about this, Robert Kennedy, and he thought, I'm prosecuting organized crime. Sinatra is actually friends with some of the most notorious Chicagoans of all time, Sam Giancana and others. And I don't know that I can have this trip happen. So that's a real story. That really happened. And when I heard that story, I thought, great idea for my second book. I'll just have Charlie and Margaret go out to LA at Robert Kennedy's behest and figure out if Sinatra is actually mobbed up or not. And they go out there and they fall in with a whole bunch of characters, including L. Ron Hubbard from the Church of Scientology and the Rat Pack and Johnny Roselli and Sam Giancana from the mob and a whole bunch of other things. But that was the inspiration. So without giving too much away, that's the basic premise of the book.
And so, I mean, I could branch out to 8,000 questions just from what you based it on, but I love it that you jumped up to the Rat Pack, and I know that had to have been a very tricky needle to thread right now, given Sinatra's women issues, misogyny, like that whole history, that they were sort of famed for this. Right as we're, thankfully having a moment where that's being looked at more. But what is fascinating about the book is, I think because of what you just said, I think because you see Sinatra in these vulnerable spaces, he's this heartbroken misogynist who's so sad about Ava Gardner.
Right.
He and he like wants this trip to happen so bad. He's just consistently humbling himself, and so how much and how little of that character did you want to play with and really fictionalize? How much did you feel, being a journalist beholden to truths? Was it just a matter of truthiness, sort of?
It was about truthiness because, if I were, you could write a whole book about The Visit, a nonfiction book. But, it's been done. There are a lot of great biographies of Sinatra that have been written by James Kaplan and others. So I wanted to be true to Sinatra in all his complications, good and bad. And for instance, like a lot of people don't know, but he was great on civil rights. Like he was in the forefront of civil rights.
I did not know that. Yeah,
but he really was. And like he was like way ahead of everybody in the 40s, 50s, 60s. He was way ahead of the Kennedys. But he was also, as you note, a sexist pig, if not worse. And as were lots of men back then, including President Kennedy. And, so and as you note, they were kind of celebrated for that until, like 2 months ago. So I wanted to capture that. And you're right. I don't know what I would have written if I'd written this book 5 years ago or 10 years ago, pre-Me Too. I don't know. But that said, I probably wouldn't have been audacious enough 5 or 10 years ago to even try it. So I wanted to get at that, but I also wanted to get at.
And real quick, by audacious, do you mean comfortable as a writer, like enough to take those risks? Yeah.
To like to make Sinatra a character in the book.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and I got a review in the Tampa Bay Times. It was really nice. That's basically pointed out like a lot of the stuff about women in Hollywood, and there are other women actresses that are in the book. Janet Leigh, who you might know from Psycho, or The Manchurian Candidate, which she was filming with Sinatra at the time. That's one of the other things that happens in the book is Charlie, the pretense is that Charlie's going to go be a consultant on this movie because he's a war hero and a member of Congress, so he can advise. So Janet Leigh is there. Tippi Hedren has a small appearance. She was
having birds thrown at her.
That really happened too. If you've seen The Birds, and I guess well, I know you have, but if the people out there watching have seen The Birds, there's a scene of, it's one of the most terrifying scenes in the book. I mean, in the movie, where Tippi Hedren towards the end of the movie walks into an attic, and the birds have burst through the ceiling, and they're there, and then they attack her, and that. And I got this from Tippi Hedren's autobiography, Tippi, which is actually a really great read.
Also the name of my first cat as a child.
After
Tippi
Hedren. She's a fantastic actress, and also sexually assaulted by Alfred Hitchcock.
Yes.
So also a part of the book, not a major part of the book, but the idea that these horrible, incredibly talented, but horrible men were just doing whatever they wanted in this era. I guess the point I'm getting to that I'm taking a long time to is it's really not that different, sadly, from what we hear about today in Hollywood. Although thankfully it's getting exposed more and more, but it's really not. It's not going to be like, oh, that doesn't happen anymore. You'll be like,
right.
I think I read a scene like this except in the Hollywood Reporter like 2 weeks ago.
And that's what it's definitely like 1961 to 2021. That is a little too close for comfort. But it's funny because, I should add that this book is, the fun of this book is like, we're hopping over to, it's the Rat Pack is definitely the main characters, but then we're getting this Hitchcock and Tippi Hedren and like the making of that. And that actually becomes a little scene,
a little plot
set piece at one point. But it was really weird because my husband and I have been on a Hitchcock. Well, we've basically been like, what are the Hitchcocks that we know less well than the obvious ones? And The Birds had literally come up as I was reading your book.
Is that right?
So I kept pausing it. I'd be like, okay, so here's what was really happening, which turns out it's not the greatest way to watch a movie, but we learned a lot. But
also not if you're going through a Hitchcock run, which I've done that before, and it's fun because it's so good. I don't think that's one of my favorites, though. Even though
it is literally probably one of my least favorites.
Yeah, I think both Psycho and The Birds are two of my least favorites, and I think the ones that were like, you know, Dial M for Murder, the ones that were plays first, and some of those are the best ones. Vertigo is a great one.
I do love Vertigo. I would go. I'm a Rear Window gal. I think I could watch that.
So good. I guess there's some movie out with Amy Adams now.
The woman in the window.
Rear Window-esque. Your best friend Amy Adams. Yes.
Yeah, my pal.
Yeah.
The loveliest human in the world. Truly. That almost sounded like I was saying that sarcastic.
No, I believe it. And she looks a lot like my colleague Erin Burnett. I always think that.
Yes, she does.
Amy Adams and Erin Burnett are like sisters in some world.
You gave Erin Burnett a little strawberry blonde situation. We'd have it. So I love. There's so many different pieces, and as I read it, it's funny because I also sort of like, I can tell that this was written by a journalist because you have such an eye for the specificity that makes a novel come to life, that makes like those little moments. And I remember in Hellfire that the idea that Joseph McCarthy would eat a stick of butter
when he drank.
Which chimed with my random fact, which is I remember reading what is it, Raging Bull, the amazing nonfiction, and there was just a quick glimpse in there that was said Steven Spielberg was so nervous while he was filming Jaws that he would sleep with a stalk of celery under his pillow.
Why?
And I was like, hold on, we need to back up because that's not a thing, is it?
That's not. Yeah, no, it's not like it's not like a rabbit's foot. I mean, like, it's like why would a stalk of celery?
I think something about he's found the smell comforting, although I might be making that up. Get Peter Biskin on the phone immediately.
The stick of butter thing comes from Jack Anderson, the famous muckraking journalist who wrote an amazing biography of Joe McCarthy that came out in 1952 when McCarthy was at the height of his power, and was really, really just destroyed McCarthy. But as a way only a journalist, a really well-sourced and well-researched journalist can do, by just like, here is this guy. Here he is, and I got to know him, and here's everything about him. And when I read the thing about the stick of butter, I'm like, oh my God, I need to write a scene where he's just sitting, because it's so vivid. It's such a gorgeous fact.
Yeah,
that because it just captures everything about him. It's just disgusting. Yeah. And the confidence that you would need to have to be eating a stick of butter in public while drinking. I mean, that's just, it just says so many things about him just in this crazy thing. You're gross, you're confident, you drink too much, so many things.
You really don't care what the other people are watching you devour a stick of butter.
Maybe you even like it. Maybe you like grossing people out.
Maybe you're into it.
Yeah.
I like to watch. But to me, what's interesting is I would be way too scared to take on a historical novel, whereas you seem drawn to it, and it would freak me out because I wouldn't. I also started my career as a journalist, and I think I'd have trouble turning off the figure out what's truth, what's fiction. Am I blurring them too much? Do I need to do fit marks as to?
Let me say that Dark Places, while fiction, your book is also based on fact. It's based on stuff that happened. I mean, you
the satanic panic. And,
but I mean, it's not like it came out of nowhere. I hear what you're saying. I think that about you, and I don't want to ruin Gone Girl for the 5 people left on Earth who haven't seen the movie or read the book.
When you hit the 10-year threshold, it's you can rosebud me. Go ahead.
Well, let me just say that I mean, there's that moment 1/3 into the book where you're like, holy shit. And then beyond that, you write in the first part's in first person from him. The second part's first person from her. And then the third part is a third person. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Is that right?
That's in Dark Places. In Sharp Object. Then what? Gone Girl is the fake first person, and then it goes into the actual first person.
Okay. Well, in any case,
it's been a long time. I may be wrong.
My only point is that is audacious. That is audacious to do that, and also incredibly skilled that you do it and you accomplish it. But that's tough. And also, I find it tough to write in first person. I find it easier to write in third.
Do you feel like it just sounds too much like you, like your voice takes over too much, or it just doesn't appeal to you?
To be frank, I think it's easier to write in third person.
See, I'm the same way about first person. I think it's easier for me. Yeah.
Well, I guess you can convey character more easily in first person, but for me, it's like, but you're only sharing the facts that this person is aware of. You limit yourself in a way. I mean, I get that you get to go through their character, but you limit yourself in terms of this is only what this person knows. I'm gonna try for my third novel. I'm gonna try to do it in first person. I'm gonna try, but I don't know that I'm gonna survive, but I'm gonna try.
You can always switch. You know, I've done plenty of books where I started out first person and was like
Control F for like I and make it he. Yeah.
Exactly. Do a search.
But let me tell you, I had in the writing of both the Hellfire Club and The Devil May Dance. I don't know what you're like after your first draft. A lot of the writers I know, like their first drafts are like, that's it, it's done. Like Baldacci and those guys, like their first drafts are done and that's it. And they mail it in and it's perfect. Wow. But between the first draft and the second draft, I get first draft blues where I'm like, this sucks. I don't, and I inevitably have like a week of writing up a storm where I'm going in there and I'm fixing the problem that you just touched on, which is the journalistic part of it that is restraining me from having Sinatra or Joe McCarthy or whoever do whatever I want them to do and just saying, fuck it, it's a novel. People understand this is not real. Like I'll source the stuff that's real at the end so people know, but like I can do whatever I want. I need to give these people a good time. And like, that's the most important thing. So between first and second draft, I made McCarthy a bigger character in the first book. And in fact, I wish I'd done more of that. In this one, learning the lessons of the first, I was like, I'm making Sinatra a major character. He's going to be like, the third or fourth big, other than Charlie and Margaret, it's going to be Sinatra.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think, I mean, is assuming people think I pulled it off, I think works.
Yeah, it absolutely works, and it feels really organic reading it. Did it feel that? I know you said learning the lessons from the first book, so it sounds like you set out, but like, was he still growing even as you're writing him?
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah. And making him bigger and making him like, if I could go back and rewrite the Hellfire Club, I would make McCarthy, and I say this to Mark Smith, who's writing the teleplay version of the Hellfire Club for TV.
Okay.
I tell him, make McCarthy bigger, make him bigger, especially now post-Trump, like make him bigger. Like he needs to be a much bigger character in the book. Like Estes Kefauver, the Tennessee senator who's in like, you don't even need him. Like you don't even just make McCarthy that guy. And, but in this one, I was just like, I need to make Sinatra the character. And it was, I didn't know Frank Sinatra, but I tried to capture him as best I could. I watched all the movies I could. I read every biography I could. And I think he really was a complicated, maybe even bipolar guy.
He certainly feels that way reading it, reading your version of it. And again, it's one of those things, I think you and I are attracted to creating characters that aren't necessarily likable, but somehow still likable, or at least my whole thing is like, I don't really care if you like my character. You're not supposed to be like rooting for Amy and Gone Girl. Like, at all. Like I'm not creating them to be aspirational. I'm creating them to be interesting.
Right. You want to just like follow what they're right. Exactly. I think that's right. That's how I feel about your characters. Like they're just.
Well, and with the, with Sinatra, I have to tell you, I have zero interest in any more Sinatra. When I picked it up, I was like, okay, I know I love Tapper's writing. Like, I know I'm going to like this, but I was sort of like, I wasn't that necessarily psyched. It wasn't like, ooh, Sinatra. And then I got into it. And it's the fact that you got past the like ring-a-ding-ding caricature sort of stuff. And like, I was feeling for this guy. I really was, in a way I never thought. I felt sorry about how sort of, this kind of desperate he was for, Kennedy to like him.
I think that's real though. I mean, like, I don't think I realized that when I heard the real story that inspired this. I don't think I fully understood how much Kennedy broke his heart. And then I read George Jacobs' book. That's Sinatra's valet.
He has a book.
Oh yeah. And then and it's not as dishy as you want it to be, but it's honest. And then it's just like you read about. I think he was platonically Sinatra. I think he was platonically in love with John F. Kennedy. I think he thought like this guy is
my person.
Witty and urbane, and I helped get him elected, and and like this is cool, and I get to hang out with the president, and like just a kind of respect that he could never get. And that was also one of the things about Sinatra that was interesting, is just he always had a chip on his shoulder. I don't know if you have friends like this, but I have friends who they think that they grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. I mean, like, nobody really cares about that anymore, really. But like, it's actually kind of cool if you did, and like, and rose to great heights. But I still have friends who like feel that they, have a chip on their shoulder, and I think Sinatra was totally like that.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. I mean, I can absolutely see that. I am the chip on the shoulder person. I'm like, yeah, I'm from Kansas City, man. Yeah, I write genre, whatever. Like.
I think people think like, I don't think that's how other people think of you, but okay. I think you were like, my famous friend Gillian Flynn, who wrote Gone Girl and Sharper Out. I think that's what they think. And I don't think, and I'm married to a girl from the Kansas City area, so we don't disparage that part of town.
No, my children have learned to say, we are going back home to Kansas City, the city of fountains.
Nice.
Our famed tagline, as I'm sure you know. So I want to hear. Okay, I got more questions I need to get in before we turn over to more questions. But did you? I mean, I know you went to USC.
I did.
And so I'm curious if any part of you had an interest in doing the adaptation yourself of Hellfire.
No. I went to, for those tuning in or who don't know my biography, which is probably most people, I went to Dartmouth. I graduated from Dartmouth in 91. And then after Dartmouth, I went to University of Southern California.
You had to work the Dartmouth thing in there, didn't you?
Well, yeah. I didn't go to.
I went to KU, man. Continue.
Oh, you didn't get into Mizzou? Is that?
I did get in.
That's where Mrs. Tapper went to Mizzou. So
rivals. We're natural.
Well, Rudd went to KU, although I don't think he got his degree, but he did go to KU.
He did go to KU.
I think he left and to act. So I think which worked out okay.
We'll see.
So I went to USC for one semester, and I was in the film production class, and I literally found myself sitting in class listening to the Clarence Thomas hearings on my Walkman. So I was like, maybe I'm not supposed to be in film school. And at the time, I don't know what USC is like now, but at the time it seemed very much about not how can we tell great stories, but more like how can we make a lot of money. That's the vibe I got. Not from my contacts, not from my classmates. My classmates were all people who wanted to be artists, but just I don't know, just the vibe I got from USC. But frankly, also, I was 22 and miserable and living in Los Angeles, which also can be a very isolating city. So No, I did not think I should write this at all, because I thought there are lots of people who can do it much, much better. And the odds, I mean, other than you, the odds of anything I write ever making it to any screen seemed at the time very remote. And since then, the nonfiction book I wrote, The Outpost, about Afghanistan, was made into a film. But beyond that, it just seems it's so rare, if you're not Gillian Flynn, that anything you write like immediately goes to screen. So
yeah, it's a consistent, I mean, so much of your energy goes toward managing your expectations, almost like there's so much energy that you have to put into, while at the same time knowing it's probably not going to happen, which is exhausting. But I was curious if for you, novel writing, in my imagination, it must feel freeing for you, being someone who, you are beholden to whatever happens that day in the news cycle, and whereas a novel, that's your world, and you kind of can control it. But I don't know if that's part of the attraction to
100%. Being able to control my characters is something that I cannot do in real life and can do in a book. Being able to control what happens next. It was a huge relief. And also, I have to say, during the last few years, especially during the pandemic, a huge respite, a huge break from this bleak nonfiction world that we've been living in, with all the death and nastiness and the pandemic. And it was great to be able to, walk away from the newspapers and CNN and my staff at the end of a day or the beginning of a day, and go and hang out with the Rat Pack in 1962, and like put them in the scenes. The opening scene, they're in Forest Lawn Cemetery, running around looking at the graves of their friends and getting drunk. But it's also just like, well, where would I want to hang out? Like I tried to make it so and this is different from the first book too. I tried to make it so there's not one scene in one place where I wouldn't want to be hanging out. The next, have a scene at the compound in Sinatra's where a bunch of young actresses are there in the hot tub. Let's go to the Oscars. Let's go to Vegas. Let's just let's watch a Rat Pack show. I want everything to be in a place where I'd want to be. And one of the nicest comments I got from Janet Maslin from the New York Times, who wrote me this incredibly kind review, was, and she tweeted later, after the book was over, I missed it. And that's how I felt about hanging out with the Rat Pack, which is, it was really fun. I mean, they're all flawed characters and this and that, but in my mind, to be sitting at a table with Shirley MacLaine and, which when you write, you're there, right? I mean, you know this, but you're right, you're there. You think about this as an experience you had almost. You can picture it in your brain. I remember there's rolls right there, and there's a carafe of red wine, and here comes Peter Lawford's wife, and and it's just it's in the movie in your head, but it's real. And I missed it too.
I feel like that's the moment, where writing, there is that magic to fiction, and if you're not, as a writer, if you're not experiencing that moment where how a character would act and in a situation that you're living in real life, and you would know how what your character would think of it. You're bringing them along to parties, or the architecture of the house that they're in, and can picture what's there. There really is something kind of magic about it. And if you're not feeling that, I feel sorry for you, and you're doing something wrong and probably writing something really formulaic and awful.
I'm going to turn the porch light on if that's okay. I'm going to run. I've been trying to text my wife, but I think she's busy with the kids. I'll be right back.
I'm just going to keep talking. So I actually really am going to keep talking. I just have I just can't recommend this book enough to anyone who's watching right now. And what is really cool about it is it is really filmic. You can picture you can picture these different moments and these different scenes and these people, and it really is sort of, you can kind of plunge yourself into it. And the things that I think you capture so wonderfully that's really hard to do is the charisma of these people. I mean, it's hard to say, like, do charisma and have that work. You know, you have to, there's a real, you make it look really easy, but I'm sure there was a lot of, I hope, please tell me this, a lot of writing and rewriting involved to get there, because it does feel so natural. And in the same way, I mean, to me, I always laugh that the reason I set so many of my books, and all of my books, in Missouri and Kansas, is, in a way, as a writer, it's easier on me than trying to write about New York, because everyone thinks that they know New York. Even if you've never been to New York, it's been so used in books and movies that it's actually harder to make in New York that's remotely interesting and doesn't feel like the tourist Epcot version of New York in your book. And I feel like it's the same thing with taking on the Rat Pack, which is kind of astonishing that you make these people feel like actual, you know, I felt like I hung out with the Rat Pack for a while.
That is so kind of you, Gillian. I mean, for me, it was just trying to capture what life is really like, which is conflict, right? So Sinatra is there at the side of the pool, hitting on a woman who's not buying it.
Right.
And he's pissed. He's pissed about it. And, you know, that's what,
because he has that entitlement. He doesn't even know what to do with it.
But that's what, I mean, that's what life is like, right? Life is like a whole bunch of moments of either you're getting what you want or you're not getting what you want. And it's all that. It's everything is either one or the other. You're either, that's what I want, that's not what I want. That's what, you know, and so I just tried to make it as much of that as possible. So when they're at Forest Lawn running around, it's not like it's all just joy. They're telling each other to shut up, and they're being rude to each other, and, you know, offending each other, and like hurting each other.
Some violence, sort of semi-violence, and you know, it gives you a feeling of actually how they made everything look all swinging, but actually how tense it must have been sometimes to hang around with that group of people.
Well, think about, I mean, first of all, they're all so talented, right? I mean, these are some of the most talented. This would be like if today, you know what, I can't even try, because I don't even know who's popular. I can't, I don't even know how to pronounce their names. Yeah. But just imagine if comparably in their heyday, Britney Spears and Justin Bieber and, you know, and Zac Efron and, you know, all these, if they were all friends and they all ran around and actually were friends. Because you know, one of the things, Andrew McCarthy, the actor from when we were kids and we watched movies, Andrew McCarthy from, you know, Pretty in Pink and everything, he has a memoir out. I want to pick the points. I haven't read the book.
I did not know this.
Oh yeah, it just came out. He just got a whole bunch of press last weekend or 2 weekends ago. And one of the things that I've read in a Q&A with him in the New Yorker, which was that there was no Brat Pack. Right. That was the thing for these actors in the 1980s, Molly Ringwald and Rob Lowe and all these. And somebody coined it for like a New York Magazine story or something, but it didn't exist. It wasn't a real thing. But these guys, it really existed, the Rat Pack, and they were really friends and so talented. But also there was a huge imbalance because Sinatra was the moodiest guy and could freeze him out for any reason. He at this point, he'd already frozen out Sammy Davis Jr., then unfroze him. He froze out Peter Lawford because he thought Lawford hit on Ava Gardner one time, which he probably did, but then brought him back once he married Patricia Kennedy, and then John F. Kennedy, he wanted to get back in.
Of course, yeah.
So he was very mercurial, and also I didn't get this in the book, but Peter Lawford is like the ambassador between the Kennedys and the Rat Pack since he's in both. Mm-hmm. And after this happened, after the real life events that are in the book happened, out. Sinatra froze him out. Done. Out. He wasn't in the Ocean's movies after that. I think he was in Ocean's 11, but he wasn't in any of the other ones that followed it. Maybe I'm getting the timing wrong, but whatever it was, he was not included in anything else from then on because he didn't deliver. Yeah. He didn't deliver.
So he just cut off this guy who'd been in his life for 10 years or something.
Oh yeah, longer. And then also, you know, but they all loved him. Yeah. But he was, you know, a ruffian. He was tough.
All right, I have a question and a comment before we turn things over to the audience. One is, again, like, I have to mention, in case anyone doubts my sincerity of how much I love your writing. I remember when we were first emailing about the book, and I literally quoted a line from an article from when I was a young Northwestern student in DC and was reading this most amazing magazine article. And I still remember the line, and like, I was like, I still remember, like, who is this guy? This guy can write.
It's the Barnacles.
He's going to go places.
It was the Barnacles line.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a piece about Monica Lewinsky, whom I had,
which everyone should look up, by the way. Just
it was for Washington City Paper. I had gone on one very innocent date with her in December 1998, and then I went scuba diving with my dad, and on my way back, discovered that this girl I'd gone on one innocent date with was in the middle of the biggest political sex scandal maybe of the century. Yeah, since
Warren Harding. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean since Warren Harding, exactly. And couldn't believe, and the line was something about just the self-flagellation about, you know, about even writing about it. And that I said I felt bad about adding my barnacle to her ship of fame. My meager barnacle. So that's nice that you remembered that.
I remember. I mean, that's weird, but that's how good, you know, everyone knows Jake Tapper for, you know, obviously that CNN gig you have, but I just admire your writing so much. So thank you. And I also wanted to ask you about the third novel, because you mentioned within the series a third novel coming, and I don't know if you're ready to share anything.
Well, I'm going back and forth between putting it in the 70s and putting it in the 80s, because now I've done the 50s and the 60s. I think maybe the 70s would be better. And then I think, you know, Charlie and Margaret have two kids, Lucy and Dwight. And I think Dwight, whose nickname obviously would be Ike, will be turning 18 in 1976, if I did the math right. And I think having Ike Martyr as an 18-year-old in Washington, D.C. during the 70s, with all the insanity that happens there, and that could be fun. And also, that's why and I would write it in first person as a way of differentiating it from Charlie and Margaret, who would be in the book, but Ike would be the main character. And then I also just thought, like, maybe it would be fun to have him a little bit. Charlie and Margaret, especially Charlie, are flawed, but they're noble characters. But what if Ike is a little bit more of a bastard? Like what? Like not like unlikable. But what if he's? But you know what I mean? Like, what if he's kind of like like, what are guys like when they're 18? You know,
nice often.
Yeah. Like, what if he's kind of cocky and maybe a little bit of a cad? Like, maybe that would be fun.
Maybe, I mean, it is the 70s, maybe dabbling a little bit.
Lots of stuff going on in the 70s. Lots of stuff that there's lots
of mischief that he could get up to.
There's a lot, and discos, lots of discos, and but 50s, and there's a lot of smoking and drinking in these first two books. Maybe other stuff is what Ike would be into. I don't know. So I'm just thinking about that, and like trying to think about, like,
I'm already thinking about it for you now, just that you said that.
You can write it.
I would like to be your consultant.
Write it and send it to me.
The consultant on this next book. All right. And is it true that you write 15 minutes a day, or like you can?
It's true that it's a minimum of 15 minutes a day. That's the rule. That is, like, I make myself write a minimum of 15 minutes a day when I'm writing. So like, I'm not writing right now.
Okay.
So like, I'm not doing it now. But when I sit down after I've read a few books and I have then I start the outline. I definitely do an outline, and starting with the outline until the end of the writing project, minimum of 15 minutes a day, because if I don't, then I'm like, I'll turn around and like 2 weeks went by and I didn't write a word.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what
I would say that like my reaction to that is deep seething anger that you were able to do that, because I need to take at least probably an hour and a half of puttering about and doodling before I can even begin to put my thoughts together. I just can't work that way.
Please don't think that I get up in the morning, do the Times crossword, and like I waste more time than anyone I know. People think I'm like super productive, but like there is so much time suck in my life. There is so much nonsense. There's so much.
What's your biggest, all right, before we go, what's your biggest nonsense? Like what's the guilty pleasure of Jake Tapper? Like,
I mean, I would say like texting friends and trying to like just make each other laugh. Yeah. I mean, it's not like, but just like not like spending way too much time invested in making 3 people laugh on tech, researching something. Doing like an intense period of research just to like driving 5 times around the block just to drop one little joke.
Yes.
And then getting mad when they don't.
It's worth it. But sometimes
where are the LOLs? Where are the LOLs?
Exactly. Feed me. Yes, I know how you feel, because we all through the pandemic, I have 4 good buddies from my Entertainment Weekly days. And every Wednesday we get together. Yeah. It's our bad movie night that we watch together, the Amazon party situation. And the whole point is just to make each other laugh while we're watching a bad movie. And this past week was Doppelganger with a very young Drew Barrymore, which I cannot recommend enough. And I really have to discuss it with people because okay, I'll stop.
Beautiful. Can I just say one thing? And I know because you worked at EW, I did a few freelance things for EW back in my freelance days, by the way.
Did you?
Yeah. When I was starting, like in the 90s.
Right
and then, but one of I have a cousin who her husband is a film reviewer. He used to be with the San Diego Union Tribune. He's retired now, but he introduced the movie The Oscar to me, which is one of the all-time worst movies.
Do you not know it? I did not know this one.
It is so bad and beautiful. You will love it so much. You and your friends will adore it.
The Oscar, okay.
The Oscar, it was meant in its time as like a great expose, like The Player for like the 60s or whenever it was. And it's so horrible, but in a great self-righteous way.
Yeah. Oh, that's the best kind of horrible. Yeah. I love it.
No, you'll love it. Oh my God, I can't wait for you to tell me all about it.
That's this.
Watch it with your EW friends. Watch it with your EW friends. I recommend you will not believe that you didn't know about this. This wasn't part of your life. I thought you were going to tell me, oh yeah, we've been watching that for 30 years.
No. Never even heard of it. I'm so excited.
The Oscar, yes.
If nothing else happened this evening, Tapper,
you might have sold no books. But you know about the Oscar, and that's all that matters.
Suddenly, viewings of the Oscar on Amazon, I was through the roof.
Yeah, I'm gonna have that as the most asked question coming up. What was that movie you mentioned?
Yeah,
the Oscar.
Exactly.
The Oscar.
All right. Okay, so we do have some questions. I'm going to try to get through as many as we can in the next 10 or so minutes. Let's start with one for Jake. What was the most fascinating thing you found out about one of the historical figures in your book while researching them?
Thanks, Lindsay. It was without question. I did not know that Sinatra was such a righteous crusader for civil rights in the 40s and 50s. And 60s. I had no idea, but he was way ahead of society, way ahead of the Kennedys. Fought for the black musicians in his band to be paid the same, to be able to. He fought to integrate the Strip in Vegas. I just had no idea. The Sinatra that I grew up with was fat and old and had a horrible hairpiece. And then, you hear his music when he was younger and you're like, oh, wow, he's really great. He's incredibly talented. But he didn't look like a civil rights crusader, singing to the Reagans. And so that was the most fascinating detail.
All right. And speaking of Sinatra, have you gotten any feedback from the Sinatra family?
I have not. I assume by now they're kind of used to it. I thought about reaching out to the daughters. He has 2 daughters that are still alive, and his son unfortunately passed. And I thought about reaching out to them. I thought about reaching out to Mia Farrow, who he married after this book takes place. But ultimately, I thought they're probably really used to it, and I don't know that they would care. And I don't know. I thought about it, though.
All right. We're going to take a quick break for a question for Gillian. How did Rosamund Pike elevate your vision of Amy Dunn?
Oh, I mean, in any number of ways. In fact, we were just emailing the other day trying to figure out a new project to do together. Because I think she's one of the most brilliant actresses working today and can do anything. I think it was interesting. She gave Amy a kind of sharpness and sophistication that was certainly in the book, but being a not sophisticated person myself, I had to fake my way through it. Called fiction writing.
Who is one of the sharpest people I've ever met. Okay, yeah.
Well, I mean, your wife's from Kansas City. We're obliged to say things like that.
I got it.
So we don't get too big for our britches. But she really isn't. She was able to give Amy this like beautiful natural grace, and this undercurrent of viciousness that you don't get until fully bursts forth. That I really appreciate that even when she was on screen, you had this sense that even when she's out of control and things are going wrong for her, like it's sort of like this girl is never really out of control. Like it's going to be okay because she's going to make it okay. And I love what she brought to that.
Awesome. Okay. For both of you, let's start with Jake. Which books have you enjoyed this past year and any recent favorites?
I read Dark Places this past year. It's fantastic. That's one of Gillian's. The truth is, I if I've read it, then I liked it because I am perfectly willing to put down a book and not finish it. Too short. Somebody asked me on that same note, somebody asked me the other day, what books have I reread? And I said, none. I have so many books to read. I don't have time to reread anything. But right now I'm in the middle of Harlan Coben's Win, which is great. It's kind of an anti-hero character from his other books. I'm also reading Baldacci's One Small Favor, which is also wonderful.
Well, you read more than one books at a time. Like you're revealing.
I'm definitely kooky that way. And I'll tell you, because when I have the paperback, and then or the thing they sell, the thing they send friends but ahead of time.
Yeah.
What is
ARC?
What's it called? R or something?
An ARC.
ARC, yeah,
Advanced Reader's Copy.
I have that. So yes, I have that. And then the Baldacci I read on my phone. So it just really depends on what time of day, because I have the Kindle on my phone. So if I'm reading at night, I'm reading Baldacci because I can, the brightness.
Yeah.
But if I'm reading in the day, I'm reading Win. So I'm sorry, that's a very long answer. Go.
All right, you, Gillian.
Gave us a lot of good information. I cannot recommend enough the 2 that I've read very recently. One is called Good Neighbors, which is stunning. Am I getting that name right? That's Good Neighbors, right? By Sarah. And then and The Echo Wife, which has to do a lot about mob mentality and how it can go wrong and how families interact with each other. And it has my favorite, some very complicated characters who you go back and forth even within the space of a page between.
What is it called again? Echo. I'm writing it down. Echo.
Good Neighbors. Good Neighbors.
Okay.
Really, really great. And then The Echo Wife is a really great one. It's basically plays with current cloning technology, and it's about a man who clones his wife, but keeps the most docile and helpful and sweet and feminine parts of her. And so this woman is faced with dealing with the clone of herself that's the sort of more obedient, domesticated, less feral version.
Sounds amazing.
Awesome.
My wife is a huge reader. It always amazes me because she's like way ahead of the world on, like, she was reading The Martian when it was self-published before she's like, this is really good. It's about this guy that goes to Mars. I know. So I'm gonna recommend to her The Echo Wife and Good Neighbors just because she'll get to them before I do, and then I'll pick them up after.
And just to clarify for anyone watching, so The Good Neighbors is by Sarah Langan. I'll put a link in there. And The Echo Wife is by Sarah Gailey. So they're both new releases.
Thank you very much. The second I said Sarah, I was like, I'm going to get the Sarahs wrong. And
no, they were both Sarahs. You were totally right.
I knew you would swoop in and save me on that one. Thank you.
I know the books that are out for sure. If I have one use, I can figure that out. All right. Let's see. We've got a lot of questions, and I'm going to pick and choose here. It's funny. Someone asked if there's any chance we'll see Charlie and Margaret living it up in the 70s, but you just talked about that.
Well,
so
I think
how old would they be by then? They'd be in their 60s?
They were Charlie was born in 1920, so he would be in his 50s, in the 70s.
Oh, people in their 50s are awesome.
I think he could be, yeah.
Really cool.
I agree. I think, I'm not saying Charlie and Margaret won't be in the book. I'm just saying that I think Ike might be the main character, but I think Charlie and Margaret will be in there. I don't think they're going to be doing lines at Studio 54, but I think, remember, Charlie's a Republican also. He's like a Ford Republican, a Rockefeller Republican. So he's going to be dealing with all the infighting going on in the Republican Party. And Margaret, I'm sure, will be. Finally, feminism has arrived. She's been a feminist since the 1940s. So she's
so prepared. This whole led up to this moment.
Yeah.
All right. Jake, since you've written both fiction and nonfiction, which did you enjoy more, and are there differences for you?
There are huge differences. So nonfiction is telling the stories that are actually true. And ultimately, the work is important. It can be more, like writing The Outpost was the most meaningful professional experience of my life, period. Like just telling the story of these service members and their families. But ultimately, I don't feel judged by their stories. Like, I want people to think that I did a good job telling their stories, and it means a lot to me. But it's meaningful to me. But they're their stories. It's their heroism. It's so. I don't feel as it's more meaningful to me to have done it, but I feel like I have less personally at risk, if that makes any sense. Because I'm telling their stories. Fiction is more challenging because you made it all up, and whereas nonfiction, you're just telling stories and you're just deciding what parts of them to tell. But you made it all up. So it's a little bit more nerve-wracking. You feel a little bit more exposed. But also, ultimately, it's a made-up story. It's meaningful because I like people to enjoy them and I like to entertain people. But the nonfiction, like I said, it hits harder in terms of making me feel like I actually contributed something to society. When I die, I assume The Outpost will be the thing that I am known best for, and there might also, and also his, he wrote some fiction too. But I assume The Outpost, just because I think it affected people more.
Yeah. So there's some questions about writing. We have a lot to choose from, but I'm going to do 2 more questions, then we're going to wrap up. For both of you, there's a question specifically, what were some of the biggest lessons you, Jake, learned writing your first novel that you used in this book? But I kind of want to adapt that. So to people out there who are aspiring writers, do you have a lesson that you've learned in your writing and something that you would recommend to them?
I mean, one of the greatest lessons, I think, is show it to a lot of people and get feedback, and show it to a lot of people who will be honest with you and give you honest feedback, who know you well enough that know, and you know, I think that's really important. I did that. I've done that for every book, nonfiction, fiction. I've always had great editors, but at the same time, an editor is one person, and you know, the more I come from a collaborative media anyway, in news, like I do the show, but like dozens of people behind me putting it on, and so I just feel collaborative. The more collaboration you can get in terms of feedback, the better.
How about you, Gillian?
I will say I'm almost the opposite, and that's maybe pure personality wise.
You don't need help,
and
that's the difference. You're better than me. It's
not true.
I don't think anybody
always looks for help, but I guess part of mine is it depends on at what stage I'm at. I do not show anyone, not even my husband, early on until there's a whole first draft.
Wow.
I'm pretty satisfied with. And I will tell you, a lot of that is because I think at that early stage, you know, with my first draft, I do 8 billion rewrites. So I do one first draft, I'm just struggling to get it through and have it be good. And then rewrites where I start having fun. But, you know, I don't want anyone else's voices when I'm in that first draft, because I don't want to be swayed. So I like to wait till, you know, I'm probably 3 or 4 drafts in and know exactly what I want, so that I know I can kind of be looking for specific feedback. You know, is the pace slow here, that kind of stuff. And that really is it. I think there's about 4 people in the world I'll show it to before I hand it over to my agent, who I deeply trust, who's a former editor, and she's been with me since Sharp Objects, back when no one wanted anything to do with Sharp Objects. So I love her, and you know, editor.
Can I ask you? Can I ask a question? Just a follow up?
Yeah,
Senator. At what point in the process do you show your husband your book to read the whole thing?
Probably draft 2 or 3. Yeah. I hoard it. I keep it all to myself.
No, I'm the same way. I'm the same way. Yeah. No, I'm the
and
same
it's because he's a huge reader. You know, one of those people who reads like 2 or 3 books a week, and I really, really trust his opinion. And so I want to feel very solid in what I've written until I give it to him, because I know even if he gives me some thoughts that I ultimately, it's sort of like, oh, that's not what I'm trying to do, appreciate the thoughts, those kind of thing, it'll still sway me because I respect his opinion so much. So yeah, I keep it to myself for a little bit.
Cool.
All right.
I guess it wasn't really advice, but I guess, I mean, to me, the biggest advice, and I think you saw it just between the 2 of us, is there's just no one way to do any portion of the writing. You know, and I always say, I guess my biggest piece of advice is actually don't spend too much time reading books about writing, talking to people about writing. Like, you know, we got to write. You're not going to know what it is until you start writing. You're not going to, you know.
Do you outline?
I don't. I put weird things on. So right over here is an entire wall that's just made of whiteboard. So I write crazy things up there to kind of, that I'm thinking of, but I tried it and I just go off the rails so quickly anyway, it's not worth it. Like in Sharp Objects, the person who ends up being the killer wasn't even in my first draft. Like, did not exist. That's how
seriously
far I go.
Oh my God, I love it.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Jake, do you outline?
That's the lesson. I mean, I'm a big outliner, but I mean, that's the big lesson. And obviously, I think I made it very clear. I think Gillian is a far superior writer to me. But I mean, the bottom line is like, there's no one way to do it.
Yeah. You got to figure out what I wish I outlined it to be far more efficient, but I just don't. My brain doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Well, I was going to do one more question, but we are over time, so I'm just going to wrap it up. I just wanted to.
Just going to stay on.
We're just going to stay and chat.
We're going to get cocktails and just keep hanging out for the rest of the night.
I got more questions, man.
I'm sorry. I would love to sit here and do this all night. Also, I do want to mention before we go, because I have to put in the plug here. We've got signed copies of The Devil May Dance. We also have the paperback of Hellfire Club in stock. So both of those can be found at the link in the comments. And of course, we always have Gillian's books in stock. Can't wait for whatever you have next. I have watched Utopia and I loved it. So good job on that.
Thank you.
You got to bring that up. It's like the only thing she's done that I haven't seen. I've read like what she wrote in yearbooks. I mean, I've read everything she's written ever. I just acknowledged I haven't seen Utopia because she mentioned it to me last year, and I wanted to say I just wanted to acknowledge that I remembered and I haven't yet seen it.
Next time you have 8 hours to spare.
I haven't seen Widows. So we've got.
We're equal.
We're balanced out.
Don't forget the Oscar, though. Don't forget the Oscar.
And thank you, Murder by the Book, for hosting us.
It's been a treat.
Around.
So special. I'm so glad to see your face again. It's been too long.
And we're so glad you're around, because I know it's been a really rough year for everybody, but especially bookstores. So we're glad you're around, and obviously Gillian and I are here to help with anything.
Yep.
Well, I really appreciate that. Doing this event tonight certainly has been a pleasure, and it was lovely to meet you, Jake. Congrats on the new book. And before my dog is about to jump in my lap, I'm going to sign us off.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.